2002, and this is the 15th anniversary, 1-5 of the stone circle. So it's already been 15 years since my dad so lovingly gave my sister and I shovels to dig all these holes for the stone circle itself. But there's more story than that, so I'm going to pass it over to Dutes here, who's going to talk a little bit about why he built the stone circle, what inspired him, what it is, and how he met Neil, and what we're going to talk about today.
Sure.
Does that sound good, Dad?
Well, thanks a lot for coming. I'm real grateful that you all showed up, and it's a beautiful day like this. We're always fighting about how many chairs should we put up. It looks like we have the right amount. It all worked out. Yeah, back in 2002, I decided, I was driven to build this, and I loved working with metal and flames and steel, and I started making jewelry, and I wanted to go bigger and share, and I learned quite a bit about the geological history of the islands just being here, and it really intrigued me. And I figured I wanted to build something that everybody could relate to, so it was more of a natural history part of it that I focused on, the scientific part. There was sort of an underlying spiritual part with the stone circle and alignment and everything that subconsciously I did that without even knowing, which when Neil will get into this, we'll find out more about it. And it's real funny because I've been taking the girls to the power spots. We've been going to Sedona and Mount Shasta in California. I was trying to go out there this year with the girls, feel the energy, check it out, and I said, let's send the energy back home in Haida Gwaii that we're living with. But it would be really, really great to know more about it and connect with it. And then out of the blue, Neil calls me and said, I'm doing this work. Are you interested? And here he is. So thanks so much for coming. This is Neil.
We'll introduce Neil here. Just give him a little round of applause for coming all the way from Canmore. And to be his help, Neil is a really interesting fellow. Sometimes. And Neil, he joins us from his health and wellness center in Canmore, Alberta, where he leads almost 20 health practitioners.
That's right, yeah.
Helping people, get to their optimal health. And he's been doing this work on vortexes for many years, at least over 20 years. And he's been researching Haida Gwaii. He'll talk about why, but at least for the last couple of years, even more. And so we're super excited that Neil said yes to my ask out of the blue, will you come to our Stone Circle event? And he kind of blindly said yes, so thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And so he's going to talk about his research. We'll have a lot of opportunity for questions. We want a really good discussion, so think of some questions while you're listening. And then after, Neil's going to do some dowsing in the Stone Circle, and there'll be an opportunity to talk more with Neil, and we hope you'll all connect with him. We've got a sign-up sheet too I'll pass around if you want more information. And with that, I will let you take it away, Neil. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody for coming out today on such a beautiful day. As somebody told me once, it rained a lot in Haida Gwaii. This is my first visit here, and this is why I think that Haida Gwaii is in an alternate reality, because it's never rained ever since I've gone to the west coast. We've got a son over in Vancouver, and we visit him often, and it never rains when we go over there. And we come here and beautiful sunshine. So do you want the good news or the bad news first? Yeah, I'll give you the bad news first. And April's looking at me here because I have a PowerPoint presentation and it lasts 2 hours. Okay.
Sorry.
Come on in.
Still coming?
Come on in.
Thank you.
There's a couple of chairs there at the front, and there's standing room at the back here as well.
Sorry.
All right, and so you all been deflated already now. I've said that. It doesn't last 2 hours. I left that one at home. Instead, this one here lasts 20 minutes. And then we'll follow it with a question and answer session. Now, before I get into this, I have to say I've been researching this now for specifically Haida Gwaii for 2 years solidly now. And there's a lot of information. There are many different layers to this subject. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to glance over the main topics. And if you need any more details or any more depth of understanding, I'm around all day, so just come and ask me any further questions. So today I'm here purely by chance. It's a pure accident I'm here. I followed a long string of coincidences which have led me here today. Now, Haida Gwaii was never on my radar years back when I started this research. In fact, it was completely irrelevant to the research I was doing. I was doing research into the world grids and how the world grids, because I'm an acupuncturist, I'm interested in networks of energy. I was researching the world grids and how they affect sacred sites around the world, and how they empower and power up and charge up places which are renowned for special effects, places of power and peace around the world. And so my research was entirely focused on the world grids, and one in particular. And I was working out the geometry and the arithmetic of this grid when, and without sounding overly dramatic, it was like a light went off and Haida Gwaii herself said, "Now is the time." So, because I always do as I'm told, as I think somebody over there would definitely disagree with that, but because I always do as I'm told, I'm here to talk to you now about the Gwaii Haanas Vortex and the golden spruce and the location of the golden spruce and the Dutheil circle. Now, there are many, many different places on this island which are united into a very, very powerful network of energy, which is owned by the island itself, which resonates because of the topological structure of the island, the shape of its mountains, the shape of its coastlines. And this energy net resonates and connects into into a world grid, which I'm going to show you. So I'm going to explain why I came here and how the chance came about later on when I get into the video. So you'll have to excuse me if I talk from behind you so I can show you some of these slides. So I'm going to get right into the Gwaii Haanas Vortex and the golden spruce and how they operate as places of power and peace. And what I mean by places of power and peace is that this is a well-known term around the world to describe places which actually generate their own power and infuse peace into the environment and into the people who actually visit those places. Now, I'm going to talk to you about how my research has actually found a particular geometry around the world into a world grid and how it applies to Haida Gwaii in itself. Now, these places themselves are places of power and peace in the sense that sacred sites around the world are considered places of power and peace. And these are special locations, and I'm sure everybody will agree that these places and the islands as a whole are very special places. But what I hope to show you is I hope to offer you an explanation as to exactly why these particular locations are places of power and peace in terms of their sacred geometry and their sacred geography. Now, what do I mean by special? Well, in terms of, I've researched this now for 2 years, intensely for 2 years, and what I found is that Haida Gwaii, or these locations, and Haida Gwaii itself as a whole island, because of its positioning on the earth and various other features, resonates to an exceptionally high degree with the resonant harmonic frequency of light. And what I mean by light is the primordial, fundamental energy that drives this universe. It creates and sustains all reality. Everything that we sense, see, and perceive is actually created out of this energy of light. And we know there are many different names for this energy. It's known as zero-point energy, mana, chi, prana, or even Nuefra to the Druids. It's a fundamental energy of the universe that modern day science is very, very reluctantly starting to agree exists. In fact, because they don't understand it, they call it dark matter. But those people have an inkling as about what it's about. They actually call it light. So this is a very, very real energy that exists in the universe. So there are certain places in the world which actually exhibit this energy, which show this energy, and so who wouldn't want to know where they are? Now, my research has been involved in finding these places and assessing how the power is generated in these places around the world. And I've used many famous sites, including the Great Pyramid of Egypt and many other sacred sites, to calibrate this work on. So it does have geometry and mathematics to it, which I'm not going to bore you with today. But these sites definitely sit up there on a par with the best of them. Now, to some people you might think, oh, well, this is all academic, it's all, out there kind of stuff. Well, it actually isn't. This is very real stuff. This is very real geometry. This is very real geodetic geometry as to why the certain physical attributes of Haida Gwaii generate this power. And so these locations themselves can be considered places of power and peace in exactly the same way as sacred sites around the world are considered places of power and peace. And I'll explain more about that in a second. Now, they are special. I'm sure everybody here will agree that these sites, the whole of this island is special. But I'm hopefully going to explain why it's special in terms of its sacred geography and sacred geometry. And as I said before, Haida Gwaii resonates to an exceptionally high degree with the harmonic resonant frequency of light. And it's just, there's one takeaway today, is that just this one attribute, which can be demonstrated through geometry, and figures don't lie, I know statisticians do all the time, but figures and geometry cannot lie. It's just this one attribute puts these locations and the islands of Haida Gwaii as a whole up there on a par with some of the most special places of peace and power that we know of in the world today. And so, like I say, I mean, where are these? So that's what my research is to do. Is my research is attempting to assess the levels of light, the levels of light resonance in these places around the world. So who wouldn't want to know where the best places are to live or even to visit? And just as a very, very quick aside, I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but the core of my work is where I compare the geometry of a landscape to the geometry of a light. That's the simplest way of explaining it. Now, I assess the geometry of the landscape by significant topological features that we find in the landscape, like highest points, lowest points, caves, coastal extremes, orientation to the poles. These are significant topological features, and believe it or not, there is actually a geometry to the arrangement of these things. If you get a map out, just get a flat map out, get a compass out or a protractor, and just start drawing circles around Mount Moresby, and you'll see down on the poster there's some examples there. But if you get a flat map out and start measuring distances between things, drawing circles, you will be amazed at how frequently the geometry of light pops out at you. And that the geometry of light, what I mean by that is the phi ratio, 1.618. And this ratio underpins the growth of all life. As light flows into matter, it does so in this formation, forming spirals, double spirals, torus shaped. So if you try that yourself, you'll see it happening. So we compare the geometry of the landscape, and we look in the numbers of the landscape, the ratios and proportions, and we compare that to the geometry of light. Now, the geometric representative figure of light is 144. We know that the speed of light is 186,000 whatever per second, and but we're not interested in the speed of light, we're interested in the geometric harmonic of light. So we look for that figure. So to simplify everything, we're looking for this figure of 144 embedded within the geometry of the landscape. Just like if you're looking for a person, you'd look for their code number, their phone number, and look in your address book. You'd look in all the numbers of the address book for the code that represents this person. So just fundamentally, 144 144 means light. Now that's well known in physics. It's becoming more and more known in quantum physics and in string theory. And it's well known by anybody who has any esoteric understanding of the wisdom teachings of the world. Oh, now this is the coincidence. This is the big coincidence that drew me to Haida Gwaii. This is a picture of, obviously, the golden spruce as it used to be. Has anybody actually experienced the golden spruce? Anybody here? Okay. So I hear or I read that it actually, some people would say it would actually kind of give off light. Is that something you've ever experienced, or does that make any sense to you? Yeah? Okay. Because I was there yesterday, and it really is. Dutes threatens to lend me his waders so I can wade across the river, but I don't think at my height I'm going to see much when I get to the middle. But I was there yesterday, and it really is a magical place. I've done some testing, I've done some dowsing, I've done some measurements there, and it confirms everything. And it actually confirms a lot more than what I have been doing, which is very fortunate, because if I got all the way over here and nothing worked, well, I'd be in a pickle. So I just find this really interesting, is that Wikipedia, once again, in its wisdom, describes the reason why the golden spruce's needles are golden. It puts it down to a rare genetic mutation. Well, that's only a very, very tiny factor in the whole equation. For example, it stands above the crowd, it stands head and shoulders above everybody in its color, in its presentation. And we know that Einstein and Tesla stand above the crowd in their intelligence and their ability to understand things. And I'm just wondering if their mothers would actually agree that they're just a pair of genetic mutations, because they stand head and shoulders above each other, above the world. That's not how it works. There are many, many things which contribute to activating that gene. All these genes lay dormant, and I'm sure all those trees actually have the yellow gene in there. Even if it doesn't, why did it activate in this particular place? Well, my contention is that this particular location, there are many harmonics, many lines of energy which actually cross through this place directly or very, very close to this area. And it's these lines of energy that found a particular seed with a particular sensitivity that was able to express that. And it's not a coincidence, because I don't believe in coincidences, that the fact that the needles turned yellow, they didn't turn blue or a darker shade of green. It expressed that gene because this is the color that we know of light, the golden color. So that's the golden spruce. Now, the big coincidence apart from that is Christine and I, we visited our son in Vancouver often, and you know, you go to the airport and you go to the bookshop in the airport. Now, you know, I still read books. I know it's strange, but so I go around this bookshop in the airport looking for a book to take on holiday. And I did 1 route, 2 routes, 3 routes, just couldn't find a book anywhere. And has anybody ever experienced the classic book dropping off a shelf, hitting them on the head almost, exactly what you need at exactly that point in time, or meeting a person? Yeah, somebody's nodding here, at least there's one person. Well, I actually haven't experienced that, but I've experienced the next best thing, is that on my way out of the bookshop, I don't know, I just pulled it right at the back shelf, and something caught my eye, and so there it was. There was the book by John Vailant's book, and so I picked it up, and there was a picture of the golden spruce. I thought that was nice, but then I read Tales of Intrigue and Greed. I'm not really interested in that, but I happened to flip the book open at exactly the page and began reading exactly the paragraph where he cut the tree down. So I thought, well, that's the end of that then, and closed the book. And then I realized or read that it was a true story, and I just couldn't believe, for whatever reason, anybody who would do that is just to make a point, as a wanton act of vandalism. So I was hooked on that book, and I started reading that. Now, the really interesting thing is I was going on holiday, and I actually had no idea about the golden spruce. I'd never heard of the golden spruce, and like I said, Haida Gwaii just wasn't really on my radar at the time. In fact, it was irrelevant to my research, as many other places in the world were irrelevant. It just didn't tie into this world grid that I was studying. But then I thought, something prompted me to go and have a look at what it was. It was like a hint, a prompt. Just go and check out the location of the golden spruce. And it's when I checked out that location that an enormous number of connections came up into the grid. Now this is a completely different subject. This is the actual grid that I'm working on. Now the geometry of the grid is the geometry of light, and it has the harmonic geometric value of 144 nested into the center of this grid. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but right at the center there is a vortex. There's a double tetrahedron, and modern physics knows that the double tetrahedron now, and especially the angle of 19.47 and 144, are all about communication and hyperdimensional movement. Now the grid has a number of cross points in it, which are really important to it. And this is what I found when I went home and started to look at Haida Gwaii as a whole. and the golden spruce in particular. But the very first thing that came out to me, now I just had no idea about this. Haida Gwaii was a tiny little island, you know, north of Vancouver, and I'd always intended to come here one day. I didn't know of it, but certainly not now. So I took a look at this. Now you've got to remember, these are lines of harmonics, and when two lines connect, and without getting into too much detail here, when you get a line of harmonic connecting two places, they immediately begin to resonate. It's like two people when they meet for the first time, they get on, they're very, very happy and whatever. What's the first thing they do? They start to talk to each other. There's an information flow that happens between people. And this is what happens with a harmonic. All the points connected in a harmonic, immediately the information becomes immediately, instantaneously accessible to every other point on that harmonic, on that line. So the first thing I saw, because I've done some work on Hawaii, and it's a very, very powerful place, lots of harmonics cross there, was that if you take a straight line on a flat map of the world, by the way, because this is two-dimensional geometry, it should be done on a two-dimensional map. We see many, many grids on a two-dimensional grids superimposed onto the three-dimensional Earth. That is inaccurate. That is not correct. But this is two-dimensional laid over a two-dimensional map. And this is a Lambda conformal conic map which is used by aviators. And a similar map is actually used by Google. They actually use a flat map of the Earth to render the three-dimensional spherical model of the Earth that we see as Google Earth. So you take a line and you draw it from the highest, from a significant topological feature, like I said before, of Hawaii, and you connect that line through to the Great Pyramid of Egypt, just because you can. You find it goes right the way through the southern tip of Lyle Island. If you take another line, for example, the grid that I was working on, I noticed that there seemed to be a lineup with an external cross point on the grid. Now, all cross points, and this is NASA talking, not me, all cross points of harmonic lines of energy are hyperdimensional portals. They've recently come out public to say there are a number of hyperdimensional portals between the Earth and the Sun. And the only reason I tell you that is because it has many, many advantages for the place where that crossing happens, for people and the land itself. So if you join a cross point on the outer edge of the grid to the Canmore vortex, which I'd spent a number of years researching and delineating, you find it goes right the way through exactly the same area. Within maybe 500 meters or so. There's another harmonic, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's another harmonic that if you align a harmonic from the center point of the grid, which is the source of everything, that equates to our DNA, our human DNA. Our human DNA in Chinese medicine is known as the source qi. And we only have so much of it in our life, and when that runs out, we die. But when you access that source qi through meditation or qigong or harmonic resonant things like the crystal bowls, it actually amplifies and resonates with your source qi and makes that stronger. Now the interesting thing here is the mathematical connection is that the number of the source qi is the harmonic number is 258, in the sense that scientists now know that if they expose broken DNA to the vibrational frequency of 528 hertz, it will actually physically repair that DNA. So that harmonic, that note has a tie-in immediately to the source of the grid and source qi, and it happens that 33 degrees is a harmonic, and that is a harmonic of 528. And when I say harmonics, I mean this is the same thing. It's like a lower C on a piano, if anybody is not a musician. The middle C on a piano is exactly the same note as the upper C. They just vibrate at different frequencies, but it shares the same qualities. You'll recognize it as a C, a lower C and an upper C. It is exactly the same note. And that's what we have here. You've got a harmonic resonance with our most fundamental energy of our bodies in the form of DNA running through the same space. And there's more, and I'm not going to get into the that purple harmonic there, which is an incredibly powerful harmonic because that harmonic ties into the whole geometry of the grid. And interestingly, when you apply the geometry of the grid, the shape of the geometry of the grid, and if you center it over the Canmore-Banff vortex, you find that the 51-degree harmonic line actually connects the Gwaii Haanas Vortex and the golden spruce, and therefore ties them into a unified harmonic whole. Those two locations are now able to talk to each other. So whatever, it's like a telephone line, it's like an internet node, it's an IP address. They're now connected by their own energetic internet, as it were. So whatever happens at the Gwaii Haanas Vortex, all these lines passing through, that is immediately available at the location of the golden spruce because of resonance, and if anybody knows anything about quantum physics, because of entanglement. They immediately occupy the same space and share the same qualities. So this is what harmonics is all about, and this is why it's fascinating. And you know, it keeps you chained to a desk. You know, I haven't been down to the pub for years, I have to say. So let's get straight to the Gwaii Haanas Vortex, and we find that the really interesting thing about the Gwaii Haanas Vortex is that it actually has, you know, I came across the vortex because of the book, because of the golden spruce, and because of the web of lines that cross over that one particular place, which is highly unusual, by the way. Nowhere else on the grid that I know in the world, including Hawaii, has that many cross points, has that many harmonics crossing at that point. And that makes for an incredibly powerful place. So I went examining that area, and when I look at it, I find that it's an area of heightened geological activity. Now, I know it's not a pleasant thought to think about living, you know, a place where seismic activities increase and the potential of earthquakes. But you have to understand that throughout the history of humankind, people have actively sought out these places. Civilizations have sought out these places because they know they are places of immense power. And when they find them, they actually mark them and also try and harness that energy using geometry again by building temples on them, putting megaliths there, putting stone circles there. So throughout the history of humankind, these places of increased and obviously increased tectonic energy have been sought out like gold dust from when they want to access higher energies. And you don't need to do this to go there, by the way. You don't need even to tune into this. You can meditate. You can do qigong or tai chi to enhance your own levels of this exact same energy. So this is like the power of the vortex. And at the bottom there, you can see what I've just said. Many ancient sites around the world are located directly upon or within close proximity of these areas. And sometimes there's weird phenomenon that we see at these places, and that's because of the magnetism. Nothing esoteric. There's actually physical reasons for these effects, lights in the sky and whatever. But the key thing is the last line is they actively seek out volcanic areas of increased volcanic activity and other places where there's seismic activity. And just to give you an example, in Iceland, the Houses of Parliament are actually sited right on the rift that's formed between the two biggest tectonic plates in the world, the North American and the Eurasian plates. And they meet and form the Atlantic Ridge. This is enormous power. It's like the backbone of the world. And so there, at Elthling, there's always been a power site, a sacred site. They actually had a place of ceremony at that site, and then they chose to build the Houses of Parliament on that site. Well, if you ask me, I think it's probably the best place to put your politicians, right on top of a volcano. But and in Karnak, for example, the largest megalithic structure in Karnak, the arrangement of standing stones, is actually hemmed in by fault systems. This place was carefully worked out and carefully chosen because it's a focal point of these tectonic energies. It's a very, very volatile tectonic region. And in the UK, stone circles, this is where I used to live, by the way, near this place. This is Castle Rig in Cumbria in the Lake District. And it used to rain every day there without fail. However, this is Castlereagh, and in the UK these circles are built within a mile of a surface fault or a tectonic intrusion. Now I think Dutheil that's a volcanic plug, isn't it? It's a volcanic plug. It's not a tectonic intrusion, but a volcanic plug is also an incredibly powerful place. So, the harmonic lines from the grid, which cross over this one location, this is way beyond any mathematical calculation. This is way beyond chance. This just cannot happen. Now the grid serves to focus the energy. You've got the raw power of the earth energy there is actually brought into focus. It's brought into alignment. Similarly, it's like when you have a diffused light source, a light bulb, and you put a lens in front of that light bulb, it immediately focuses that light. And that's what happens. That's what the grid is serving to do. It's giving it an identity. It's giving it actually a location. And it's a place of immense potential. And this is common knowledge about Earth vortices throughout the world are always places of power at every level of the human body. These are gateways to higher levels of consciousness. And the geometry of the places is the torus. There's matter. It's a matter energy conversion unit. There are invariably geological and atmospheric effects, and often these are places where people experience psychological or effects on their consciousness. Now, you might think, again, this is all academic, but when you think about it from a health and wellness point of view, and that's my job, I do this every day, from a health and wellness point of view, anywhere that begins to resonate or approaches the resonant harmonic frequency of light, and it's been shown that they immediately experience growth in increasing coherence, balance and harmony on a psychological, physical, spiritual and an emotional level. So these places like the Golden Spruce and the Gwaii Haanas Vortex have that potential because the geometry of these places locks them in to the geometry of light, tunes them directly to the fundamental universal life force of this universe. I'm going to run by you a couple of examples of how I actually assess how closely a place resonates with the frequency of light. Now, it's not just resonating with that number 144 and finding it in the geometry. It's how easy it is to find that number in the geometry. It's how accurate that number is. I mean, a footprint's a footprint of a foot. A tire print's a tire print is a print of a tire. You either find 144 or you don't find it. And also sometimes it takes a long time to drill down. You will find that 144, but in some places like the UK, my analysis of the UK, it takes many iterations of a calculation to hit that 144 level. Now I put that down to the fact that the UK has had many years of strife and trauma, and it's going through more trauma now. And this has served to bury the life force, whereas on Haida Gwaii, it's pristine. It is immediately available. And I will tell you now that out of all the places I've analyzed around the world, sometimes I'll get half of 144. Sometimes I'll get a double of 144. The Dutheil stone circle comes out an exact double harmonic of 144. So it hits 144 and it resonates at a harmonic level. So when you stand in that, you're immediately benefiting from all the qualities of resonating with the field of light, the life force. The UK came out, these figures won't mean anything to you, but the UK came out at 127, got a score of 127. That puts it far down the line, but it did get 144. So to get from that number, it takes quite a number of iterations. Haida Gwaii came out at exactly 144. That is not chance. There is no way on the earth that you know, you can calculate the chances of that. And 144, I didn't pick 144. This is actually came from my research completely elsewhere. 144 is evidence of the existence of a resonance with light. So let's give you a quick example here. I won't keep you too long. Let's just take the latitudinal location, and I did confirm that within a few meters and without wading across the river. So we come out at an approximate location of 53.63. Now you take that number, and in harmonic calculations we use the number as the calculating unit. We can move it up and down, ignore decimal points and zeros and whatever, but that's another story. So here we go. We take that number, and the actual displacement from the North Pole, the distance of that location to the North Pole, is 36.36. You round that up to 36 and multiply it by 4, and you come out at exactly 144 harmonic of light. Now I'm showing you this example for two reasons. One, it's because it's simple, and the other reason is because it's simple. It's a simple, quick result, but it also proves the point that 144 is so easy to find anywhere you look for it in Haida Gwaii, in any of its significant topological places. So that was easy to find there. So you think that's good, so let's look again at the displacement from the South Pole, and there we find it's exactly, we don't even have to do any calculations on it. You get 143, which is rounded up is 144. So anything on that latitude around the world has the ability to resonate with the harmonic of light, the geometric harmonic of light. Just like anything at 19.47 around the world, like Hawaii, are very powerful places of upwelling of energy. You see this on Jupiter and the planets, on the sun, where the sunspots go around, and in Hawaii. It's well known that there are certain lines of latitude that give rise to energy. So anywhere on that latitude will give that. So let's get even more specific. I'm not happy with just staying with the latitude. Let's get even more specific and look at the line of longitude, and this uniquely identifies the location of the golden spruce. And through a simple calculation, the square root twice divided by 2, we come at 169. And if you take that 169, when you calculate that out with a simple calculation, you get to 144. Now 169, according to Bruce Cathy, who is he's rewritten Einstein's unified field equation, tells us that 169 is used by the military as a frequency of communication. He also goes further and says, because it's a frequency of light, and it relates to mass, it's not the frequency of mass or the frequency of the Earth, but because it relates to light, he also says that when you resonate at that frequency or tune to that frequency, you have an increased interdimensional ability to communicate. So let's calibrate it to the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid, we know, is used to forget about the esoteric aspects of the pyramid. The structure of the Great Pyramid of Egypt has been designed using the geometry of light. You've got 1.618 and 3.142. You've got phi and pi encoded into the Great Pyramid. It's well known. And so when you do a calculation on the Great Pyramid, it actually takes a longer calculation. If you take the arc distance of the pyramid to the equator, and then divide that by the side length, you come out at 144, a harmonic of 144 exactly. So you find an artificial structure built on the world, built on the Earth, that's deliberately been built to tune to the frequency of light, and there you have a natural structure on the Earth that tunes into exactly the same frequency, plus 169. So let's look a little bit closer at the Gwaii Haanas Vortex, the geometry of the Gwaii Haanas Vortex and the golden spruce. You find there's an amazing relationship there. There's actually an angle, it's 340 degrees north. The bearing equates to the other way around at 19.47 approximately, and a distance of 66 nautical miles. And when you simply divide those figures, multiply them together first, you get 144. 1269 is an important figure also. And when you divide them, you get 144 again. So these places, this is physical geometric evidence that these places resonate with the geometric harmonic frequency of light. Not everywhere it does. and these hit it really accurately. 19.47, as I said before, relates to tetrahedral geometry, and there's many workers like Nassim Haramein and Richard Hoagland who explain this in a lot more detail. This seems to be the tetrahedron is the geometry of hyperdimensional communication, which is at the center of the grid actually. And even so much so that Richard Hoagland tells us that the Great Bend in the Nile is actually at a location of 19.47 and 33 degrees east. 66, incidentally, is half of that is 33, so that's the equivalent, the harmonic equivalent. So this is just an example of a quick geometrical analysis. If you look at the blue circles, you can see that the Gwaii Haanas Vortex is placed at a perfect phi relationship, which is the geometry of light, a perfect double phi relationship with the whole of the islands. When you expand that and scale that double spiral out, it will touch the two tips of Haida Gwaii at exactly the harmonic of 144 again, which is a Fibonacci number. It could have touched it at 8, it could have touched it at 16, but no, it touches the tips of the islands, including Langara, at exactly the 144 harmonic at a phi ratio. So the fact that that sits there nested at that location in the island is evidence of it's tuned to the geometry of light via the phi ratio. I'm just going to finish off now. So of course all this is just coincidence. It's just because I can't think of anything else to do with my life. I just make up these numbers. Absolutely not. And I'm going to show you something in a minute. So the basic premise of a coincidence is the fact that it doesn't repeat. In information theory, when something repeats, and if it repeats often enough, it changes from a chance occurrence into a pattern, into information that is predictable and repeatable. And that's what's happened with these alignments. Like I say, get a map out and just go looking at the geometry of Haida Gwaii, and you'll find these numbers all over the place. And so it is with the alignments. They repeat over and over again, and Haida Gwaii's connection to the light. So here you go. This is the big coincidence in the universe. How is it that we can actually experience a solar eclipse? Well, people who understand that will know what I'm talking about. But this is Einstein's quote. He knows there's no such thing as coincidence. And Deepak Chopra is just basically you're reading the book of the universe. So now, I'm going to finish off with this now, and I'm just going to show you something that I came across, just playing with numbers and whatever. There's one last thing I'm going to show you, which shows, well, I'll let you make up your own minds. Now, you've probably all heard of gematria. Gematria comes from ancient Greek and whatever. It was a way of modeling the universe. It's based on geometry, and it's where they assign letters and numbers to they assign numbers to letters and letters to numbers, and it's a very unique way of Plato and Socrates would use this to talk about harmonic relationships and describe the structure of the universe. Now I'm just going to quickly show you this. So the actual name of Haida Gwaii, those letters in gematria mean light. So let's look, there's a number of different kinds of gematria, but let's just look at the English and the simple gematria. Now, it doesn't even matter what they are. The fact that we're going to get these results is going to be really interesting. There's nothing arbitrary about the mathematics of Greek gematria. It's based simply on logic, mathematics, and harmonic manifestation. So remember, in physics, 144 means light. In gematria, it means light as well. So if you want to go the esoteric route, it means light. So let's look at the name of Haida Gwaii. The actual letters of Haida Gwaii in English gematria equal 432. And 432 is a harmonic. It's actually 3 times divided by a third of the harmonic of light. Divided by 3 and you get 144. Take Haida Gwaii again in simple gematria, 72. Yeah, it's a harmonic of light. If you multiply it by 2, you get 144. Now just that in itself is enough to go back and feel, oh, well, our place is named after light. Even the name means light, which is good. Many ancient Greeks, maybe many ancient gods, the names of gods throughout the history of mankind have been named after these exact figures to mean different variations of light, and which equated to numbers. So the phonetic spelling of Haida Gwaii there in English geometry. Now, what are the chances of this? I can't even say that properly. But look, that string of numbers equals 864. And yet, you guessed it, 864 is a harmonic of light divided by 6, which is a very significant number when we're talking about geodetic calculations, comes out at 144. 864 is also the diameter of the sun, the biggest source of light in our solar system. You take half of that, you take a radius and square it, and you actually get the physical speed of light as well. So you've got light encoded in there. And in simple gematria, that same spelling is exactly equal to 144, the harmonic of light. Now, somebody please tell me that's just coincidence. So let's just look at the other side. Before we go, we got the Queen Charlotte Islands. What does that mean? Well, there's two numbers there, 275 and 1650. And when they're translated into words, the Queen Charlotte Islands has the equivalent meaning of the thing that should not be. I have no explanation for this. And there's another one just to confirm that, because they have no knowledge. So, you know, those enlightened souls back in 2010 who chose that name Haida Gwaii either knew something we didn't, or they were, to me, they were divinely guided to name it that. And so that's it. That's the end. Thank you. Any questions? I'll come up the front if there are any questions, and then we can all get outside in the sun.
How do you explain how an area of such power and light can also attract this negativity?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, the classic answer would be to say there are always two sides of the same coin. You can never get light without shadows. Wherever there's light, there are shadows. But the important thing here is that when we deal with light, it's the primordial energy of the universe. Everything originates in this field of energy. The trouble is, consciousness gets in its way. People gets in its way. And when people have a vested interest, when people don't resonate with that energy, they can't be guided by that energy. They live in a shadow, and in that sense, they follow a lower vibrational pattern of behavior, of exploitation, of money, of greed, because they are operating at a lower level of consciousness. But I have to say that throughout the history of mankind, people have found these sites, they've marked these sites, and they put their intention into these sites. This is what ceremony is all about. And by performing ceremony, by expressing an intention for this light to be manifested, to let it out, then you'll find there'll be a dissipation of this kind of exploitative behavior. Now, they've done this around the world. There's the Noetics Institute, the consciousness program, which actually has people meditating, and they literally connect into this field of light, and it's you know, it's not trivial. Crime rates drop, pollution is measurably reduced, and negative activity on the land also is reduced, like infestation because of over-management of places. When people think they can manage nature, all kinds of weird and wonderful things come down the line. But when this field of coherence through meditation is applied to a place, like I said before, that place begins to experience those benefits. So it's about our responsibility, and it's our intention that enables that light to express itself. And you will find, if a group of people, or one or even two people get together with a focus in mind, you will find a reduction of any behavior that is not in accord or tuned to the frequency of that primordial energy, the life force.
Great question, Elizabeth.
Good question.
Are there any other questions? You can just raise your hand.
I don't have a question, but I think it's quite interesting that Lyle Island is where, and it's just giving me chicken skin to talk about it, where the Haida and all their friends made the stand
Yeah, exactly.
for no more logging.
And why
And
was it
Gwaii
chosen?
Haanas.
Why was it chosen there?
And it reverberated around the whole world. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the grid.
Yeah.
But why was Lyle Island chosen? Well, because somebody somewhere, we are all in tune to this. We
Yeah.
just have to get our heads out of the way.
Yeah.
We all know this, and they obviously knew that this was the best place to sort of, to make that change, to establish
Yeah.
the future,
Yeah.
you know? Good. Yeah,
Thank you, Babs.
thank you.
Mhm.